excited to be partnering with Rise Above Colorado and Denver Health on a youth engagement initiative, which will address behavioral health in the Denver community that affects youth. And a huge piece, really the biggest component of this work that we're going to be doing is a Teen Action Council. And we will be hiring a coordinator to be kind of doing this work and working with teens. And our ideal candidate will have been a recent DPS student. So I imagine that some of you all here for this college readiness webinar may have some youth that are soon to be recent DPS graduates. So if that maybe is a fit, I will put a link in the chat. And yeah, I'd love for you to share it with your students if that's something they might be interested in. And with that said, I would like to introduce my supervisor, Michelle Holeen. She runs prevention services at DPS, and she has two 16-year-old boys who are, I believe, ready to start doing this college readiness, everything. So thank you so much again for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me. Yes, I have 16-year-old twins. One is very close to starting this process, and the other one is going to be on his way soon as well. So selfishly, I'm very interested in this topic. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to introduce our panel presenters. And we have several questions that each of our panelists will answer, and then there'll be an opportunity for folks to ask questions at the end. So with us today, we have Chris Lord. If you would raise your hand, Chris. He's the Director of Alcohol and Other Drug Programs at Collegiate Recovery at CU Boulder. He's the Associate Director, is a licensed addictions counselor, licensed professional counselor with experience working in withdrawal management, syringe access, residential treatment, outpatient treatment, medication-assisted treatment, early intervention, prevention, and recovery. So very broad range of expertise. We also have Dana Kobold. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, good. Raise your hand. She is the first-year coordinator at Red Rocks Community College. She's been an educator for 30 plus years and has served in various capacities at the secondary and collegiate levels. Her positions have been on the front line with students, such as high school science teacher and guidance counselor, as well as residence life, academic advising, and student life and leadership at both 4-year and 2-year institutions. So thank you so much for joining us. And then Lynann, who I know as Annie Butler. I know Annie from, she founded Professional Counseling Services, which provides a 6-week intervention program for students facing suspension from high schools and school districts in the metro area. She is also, she has a master's in the arts of counseling psychology and counselor education, a master of philosophy. She's also a doctoral candidate because she wasn't busy enough. She's a licensed professional counselor and addictions counselor, and she's the department chair and professor in the Human Services and Counseling Department at Metropolitan State University of Denver. So thank you so much for joining us. So we are just super excited to have this panel of resources and information, and I'm just going to go ahead and ask the first question, and then you all can just take your turns. Do you want to go in a particular order, or do you want to just kind of pop in as you choose to respond? Any preferences? All right. Our first question is about marijuana. Research tells us that this age group comprises the highest users of marijuana. And so we're kind of looking at that 18 to 25-year-old range. Can you tell us some strategies for parents to have conversations with their children about what to expect given the increased exposure they may experience? And I would say just pop on in if you're ready.
I guess I'll start unless anybody else wants to. Is that okay? Hi, all. I'm Chris. Thanks for being here today. Yeah, so I guess this question's about marijuana. You know, I tried to look up some data just to have some clarity on nationally what marijuana looks like at the college age population. So what I did find was that in 2020 in the fall, they do something called the NCHA, the National College Health Assessment. There was about 24% of students that reported using marijuana at least once in the past 3 months. And I think in terms of strategies, right, for how to talk to students about marijuana or any drug, what I really want to encourage people to do first is look at how, I think you need to expect that students or anyone, right, might ask you about your experiences in college or at that age, right? And so be prepared to answer some of those questions and reflect that we all have a relationship with alcohol and other drugs, regardless of whether we choose to use or not. It exists on a continuum, right? And so being sort of prepared to look at my own biases as I work with people has helped me to be able to have conversations with students to help them explore and better understand the relationship that they want to have with marijuana and other drugs. So I'll just start with that piece, get us kicked off. So thanks.
I'd love to build off of that, because that's part of what I was going to say as well, Chris, that one of the questions I get a lot from parents is, I've used or I've never used. What do I do when my kid asks me? And I would recommend being honest. And honest doesn't mean, oh, not only have I used, kid, I partied and here's what I did. That is not what I mean. But if you chose not to use, I would share why. You know, I was really scared to, or, you know, grandpa's an addict, so it made me afraid, whatever. Or, you know, I did try it. Even if you have an extensive history, you don't have to explain all that, but you could say, I have used it, but you know what, honey, the strengths are so much different now. And back then it was much milder and it didn't have the same effects. People didn't go to the hospital because of an edible. So there are ways to share your own experience, being authentic and honest in a way that still uses it as a teachable moment. So I totally agree with what Chris said.
I had the opportunity of talking to our peer coaches at Red Rocks, and they're trained and they work out of our Healthy Minds Resource Center, because I thought I want to go straight to the students and get their perspective, because they've been there, done that. They've had these conversations with their parents, and they've also been having these conversations with students at the college. And one of the things that they pointed out was having those frequent, open, and non-judgmental conversations. They said, if you're telling your student that it's safe to talk to me, I promise I won't get mad, then you need to mean that. So you need to make sure that you are approachable for those conversations. They also said it's important to, make a safety plan as well with your student. They're going to be involved in, new experiences and some things that they may not be used to. And them knowing that, you are there for them and you're in their corner. So whether or not it's a safe word that you text or something to help that student get out of the conversation, then that's going to be very helpful. And then the last thing that they said too is to, if you know that your student may already be using, to talk about safety in a larger sense. Ensure you're not driving while you're impaired. Maybe you're providing your student with an Uber card, for example. And then also not accepting anything from anyone else. And then, of course, recommending resources for students, whether it's on campus or in the community, to access to try to, kick whatever habits they may currently have before they even go to college.
Dana, can you talk a little bit about how can students find available resources?
I wish it were easier said than done, Michelle. At Red Rocks, we have so many free resources, including free counseling sessions, and we'll have students at the college there for a year saying, I didn't know we had that. But I think it's just trying to get that out in as many different ways as you can as a college. And so whether it's via text or weekly emails, we have kind of a communication plan at Red Rocks that we strategize what information do students need at what point of the semester. And so that way we're able to send those email blasts out. We also have something called a virtual student union, where students can go, and it's kind of a one-stop shop virtually to learn about the different resources on campus. And our mental health counselors recently put out a campaign about, COVID stinks, but what didn't, and they were trying to have students look at the positive and what's all these amazing things going on. So when they're doing those activities and those campaigns, they're getting the word out about their services as well as the other resources on campus as well.
Great. Is there anything else, Chris or Annie, that you want to add?
If we're talking about college resources, I've got a few things to add. MSU Denver and most of the universities around the state and around the country, there's a lot of services students can access, which are paid for in their student fees. So there's not another fee that's associated, but it's things like the counseling center, access center. If students have a learning difference or an emotional diagnosis and they need extra support, the access center can help that student with accommodations that are appropriate. We have the oldest LGBTQ center in any university in the state. We just celebrated, I believe, 30 years. We're very proud of that. We have an addictions recovery community on campus led by students to support other students. So that's pretty cool. And we have a TRIO program, which supports first generation students, people who are low income. We have support services for veterans, a lot of student clubs, faculty mentors, and I'm missing some. So each university has got services there to provide support for students, whether it's substance abuse related, mental health related, or academic. And so we all are there, right, to help support students because we want them to be successful no matter where they choose to go for their academic career.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like so many resources that can be overwhelming. And at least sometimes I'm not even sure. And I work at a university, like, where do I go for this? And so I think the short answer too is just, if you're not sure, reach out to somebody, right? Reach out to somebody at the university or wherever you are, right? I think there's what Dana and both Lynann are saying is just that there's a lot of privilege that comes with being at a university, and you have access to a lot of resources there. So yeah, that's really great. And the only other thing I'd say in terms of did you want to say something, Lynann? Go ahead.
No, you're good. I'll just add at the end.
The other thing I want to say in regards to the question about how to talk with, new college students or just people that are adolescents in general about substance uses. I used to think that they wouldn't be interested in learning about like the brain or how it impacts their body, but it turns out at least the students that I work with, are very interested in learning about how substance use impacts them. And I find what works really well is rather than telling them how it impacts, how alcohol or marijuana or other drugs might impact them, I ask them what they think and how that might impact them, and give them space to process some of those pieces themselves. So thanks.
I think it's like keep leapfrogging with all these great things people are talking about. But to Christopher's point, I was reading an article a while back that said that they think every new college student should have a session on how the brain works. How does one learn? And then taking that a step further, then what are things that impact learning? Because we know that the frontal lobe doesn't fully develop till about age 25. And so with all the executive functioning like problem solving and decision making and emotional regulation, our newer students, they're still, trying to figure that out with a brain that's not quite there yet. And so that really could be helpful to know those things and to seek out that information.
And building off of that, I would concur, and I would say students really want to have those conversations with their parents. Sometimes parents tell me, well, my kid's 15 or 16, they're done. Like, I'm done. You're really not. And students want to hear from their parents, and they want their parents to listen. I'm so glad Chris said that, because so many times I think parents feel that their role is to lecture, because that's what we got from our parents, or a one-time really awkward sitting on the couch conversation. And it should be a series of conversations looking for those learning opportunities. Chris also mentioned having a relationship with faculty, and I really wanted to underline that and share ever so briefly how students can do that. But setting up advising times with your faculty right away, figuring out a faculty member with whom you feel comfortable, and then developing a relationship with them. And that might mean setting up an advising appointment every semester, but to get to know them a little bit. And that really helps retain students in college. It helps the faculty to know you so that when the student needs a letter of recommendation for a scholarship or for an internship or for a job or graduate school, we've got more to say about the student than, yeah, he was in my class and he had 2 eyes and hair. You know, we really can say the student's amazing and how the student's amazing. So lastly, on that note, we want to get to know students. That's why we're here. It's not for the money and the glory. We truly care about students and we want to get to know you. And we're kind of cool too sometimes, or we used to be. So we want to get to know students for that reason.
That's great. Thank you. You touched a little bit on this, but the next question was, what are some ways that parents can talk to their students about the risks of alcohol in terms of their health and safety? So you touched a little bit on some of that stuff with the brain, but any other tips or suggestions for parents in terms of having that conversation?
Yeah, I've got a couple. One would be some gentle war storying. So sometimes, for example, if a commercial comes up or something about alcohol comes up on the radio or a show and you've got that teachable moment, to be able to say something like, you know, I've heard of people who have been assaulted when they've been passed out or who drowned in their vomit, or, you know, to bring up a story like that, which we've all heard those, and then sort of nudging your student into a conversation gently about it, especially when the moment presents itself. Like I said, it came up in a movie or something. And the other piece I would add is to let your student know if you want them to call you, if they're too intoxicated to drive, and that's alcohol or marijuana or any other substance. If you want them to be able to call you, please have that conversation early and often. You shouldn't become a cab ride. If you're picking them up every Saturday night, that's a different conversation and that's a red flag. But if you want your kid to be safe no matter what, you want them to call them, tell them. Because I've had parents say, oh yeah, they know. Do they? Have you told them? Do they know that they won't be in trouble? So those are my thoughts.
Any other thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts. It's hard to condense them, but yeah, I liked what Lynann said there. You know, there's this handbook. It's kind of old. It's from 2010. It talks about exactly what we're talking about. I think it's called the Parent Handbook for Talking with College Students About Alcohol. I know that Leah had mentioned that she would send out some resources afterwards, so maybe we could include that in there as a resource, because they outline a few steps for parents about like what to talk about, right? It talks about like sharing and talking with your student about like what are the physical impacts and the impacts on the brain, right? In terms of using alcohol, making your opinion clear, but still being welcoming of like having a discussion and welcoming what the student thinks about the positives or benefits of using alcohol, and also like unwanted experiences that come with that, right? And dangers that come with that, right? And exactly how Lynann mentioned that piece too, right? Being open and willing to recognize that this person is separate from their substance use, whether it's alcohol or anything else. And of course, if you need support, I'm here and I want to talk to you about it, right? I don't know about you, but even as an adult, I get nervous to acknowledge that substance use exists and that I have a relationship with alcohol, right? That exists, and it can be nerve-wracking in our society because there's judgment, but the truth is we all have a relationship with substances, regardless of whether we use or not, right? We all have a relationship because substance use impacts all of us. And the truth is also that all substances, all drugs, they have some benefits. There's a reason people use. And if we can't acknowledge some of those pieces, while also balancing out that there are drawbacks and serious harm and consequences that come with substance use, right? It's going to be really hard for young people to take us seriously because they know that there are benefits. They know that people use drugs and alcohol, right? So yeah, that's my comment for now. So thanks.
And I've got a couple of points. One is for those of you on this webinar, don't get overwhelmed with everything that we're saying, because your conversations are also not a one size fits all. So if you're trying to, write down 20 different ways you're going to approach your student, that is, that in and itself can be a little scary. So this is about you picking out a nugget here and there that you think resonates with you and your style to be able to work with your student. And so then with the alcohol piece, again, acknowledging, to your students that everybody's body and brain is set up differently. And so if you are in a situation in which there is alcohol or other drugs, just to know that this isn't a competition. So if all of a sudden, there's a game about, how many shots can you drink in 1 minute, for one, you don't have to take part. And for two, this is not the time to be comparing yourself to others to fit in. Also, really encourage your students to check out all the activities that are offered, on campus through the student life department, through Healthy Choices offices, because there's many activities that are available for students to take part in that have no alcohol at all related to that, of course, type of programming. So get connected to student life. And then I think this was brought up in the marijuana one. It is a good time to talk about family history, because college can be a prime time for drinking or marijuana use. And we want to make sure that it doesn't get normalized during their college years, but we're able to, stop that piece before it could move on to an addiction.
Hey, thank you.
I would just add to that conversation, because all of these points are, I think, very important, the idea of harm reduction. So if the student's going to use or drink, don't drive. If the student's trying to cut down their marijuana intake, try to use after classes or after work. You brought up shots, and for students to understand that when you slam shots, it shuts down the primitive part of the brainstem and can be fatal. So how do you moderate that? So maybe you have a drink and then you have a soft drink and then you have a drink. So teaching students, if they're going to go out and do these things, do them in a way that it's safer and healthier for them.
Absolutely. Ensuring that you've had something to eat and staying hydrated, have that bottle of water with you, and then that Uber gift card so you're able to get a ride home.
Yep, those are all really, I think, important points. And, again, this piece around keeping people safe, I think, is hugely important. I'm actually going to skip to our last question here, just because I want to make sure we have time for some parent questions, and then we can always circle back if we have additional time. But certainly as a parent of soon to be college students, this is certainly one I'm interested in knowing about. I do think it's important for our students to understand what are the rules and potential consequences of using substances on campus, so they really understand what could end up happening, and so they're, better prepared in making decisions.
Go ahead, Chris, I'll jump in after.
Okay, thanks. Well, a lot of my job is to work with students that are going through the conduct or court system in Boulder for minor in possession tickets. So I can't say how it is everywhere, but I know in Boulder, right, if somebody is contacted by police or by a university official with alcohol or marijuana, they're given a ticket. Sometimes they have to go to court or through the student conduct office, depending on where that is. And then they come and see me or the staff that I supervise. And we have it depends on the severity of the sanction, but usually between 1 and 4 meetings. And our goal is to help to support them to look at and better understand their relationship with substances, and to empower them to make decisions that will help them to have wanted and avoid unwanted experiences in relation to their alcohol or other drug use. But I mean, there are people that, of course, have much more serious consequences, right? Over time, if you have several run-ins with law enforcement, that sort of thing, right? Suspension or expulsion exists, right? That's at the college level, that still exists, right? On a physical health side, right? Of course, right? I mean, the worst consequence is the scariest one, I think, is death, right? And that exists too, right? Overdose exists with alcohol and with other drugs, right? So I know that there is a lot of talk about fentanyl and that being cut into other drugs as well, right? So that's a whole nother story, but But on a smaller scale, right, you know, in that survey that I mentioned, the National College Health Assessment, I think it was like, of the students that drink, I think it was like a quarter of them reported having really harmful experiences, like things like blacking out, passing out, like not being able to remember experiences, unwanted sexual experiences, harm to self, in relation to their alcohol use, right? So of our students that report drinking, many of them also report having unwanted or harmful experiences in relation to that.
We're losing you just a little bit. You're kind of cutting in and out.
Oh, sorry. I said of the students that, thank you for telling me. I did not know. I'll get close to my screen here. I said of the students that report drinking, right, a decent percentage of them report having some level of unwanted or harmful experience related to that substance use and alcohol use. So.
And I would add, it also affects ability to sleep, to get information into the brain, to be able to retain information for tests, you know, be able to recall it, that kind of thing. So in our office, we have a professional review team if we've got a student who's involved with substances, and that is both for accountability and for support. And the university has a care team, which is really for support and helping students with the recovery community, with the counseling center, that kind of thing. And then of course the conduct office as well, as Chris mentioned. So while there is support, there can be consequences in addition.
Absolutely. And to just jump on a few of those comments is, you know, students really are responsible for understanding these policies. Again, easier said than done, but whether they're looking at the student handbook and you know, going through their orientation programs, these types of things are mentioned in terms of, right, what potentially could happen. So whether it's anywhere from suspension to expulsion, you know, what about those thoughts of losing financial aid or losing scholarships, and how that would impact your ability to be able to continue as a student. We also have kind of a CARES team that was mentioned. Ours is called the Behavioral Intervention Team. And so whether it's academics, substance abuse, mental health, whatever it is, all of us on campus have an opportunity to put forth a name if we see something going on, because, you know, first is the care for the student. You know, we want them to be healthy and happy and thriving, but with that care does come the consequences, which were mentioned. And one of our peer coaches made a great statement to me. She said, Dana, you really need to weigh the pros and cons. You need to decide your priorities as a student. Is it partying or your academic future? Some students are able to have that balance. Some students are not. So you really have to decide long term, what is my goal for being at my particular institution?
You know, there's another long-term goal I want to bring up. So we run a graduate program as well for clinical behavioral health. And one of the things we look at when we have students apply is their grade point average. And so when a student has a couple of semesters where they partied and their grades slipped, that lowers their grade point average and it affects their ability to get into graduate school. And I know that's longer term thinking. A lot of students may not be considering grad school yet, but I know in my field, it's pretty much a requirement if you want to get anywhere in the field. So another thing to keep in mind regarding consequences.
Okay, I want to give an opportunity for questions. So if anybody has a question, if you want to type that into the chat. And while people are doing that, maybe I'll ask one more on my list. Talk a little bit about self-care and stress management. What are some of the ways that teens can handle the stress that college may bring?
Okay, I'll jump in. So I would say getting involved, student clubs, attending sporting events, you know, when we can do these things again, plays, concerts on campus, that involvement really helps folks to feel connected, because it's hard to move away from home and create a new community and start classes and so having that sense of connection can be really important. I'd also encourage people to connect with a colleague from every class. That could be a study buddy. It could be somebody to turn to if you're sick or can't make a class one day. I mentioned earlier, get to know your faculty. and then all of those resources on campus.
Yes, absolutely. And back to that one size doesn't fit all. I think we have to ensure that our students realize that too. Somebody might be a jogger, somebody might be a painter, somebody might like to play video games. There's probably 100 different ways people could take care of themselves and bring their stress down. And students need to find what works for them. You know, what is something that brings them joy, and intentionally get that scheduled in their day or in their week. In terms of maybe just some real logistical things, walking is great. You don't have to have any equipment to be able to do that. And some of the, I also teach Psychology 101, and some of the brain science shows that if we walk 9 miles a week, so literally we're only averaging about a mile a day, we actually can make new brain cells. So I know we have billions, but the more the merrier. And so why not get some walking in? Also, for self-care, we really need to think about that time management plan. Some people say that they thrive on procrastination and those tight deadlines, but we still want to ensure our students have a way to monitor what's going on, because that can be a tremendous amount of stress for one procrastinating. We also need to make sure that we are taking care of those basic needs, which we've mentioned several times. We know that if our students aren't sleeping and eating or feeling safe, that they are in survival mode and not thrive mode. So they're not going to be maybe able to focus on that calculus problem or want to even attend a club meeting. And then another thing you might be able to do is just nonchalantly put some things out there. Maybe when you took a tour, you saw a fitness center and you might say, hey, I remember seeing that fitness center on campus. Have you used that? That sounds like that would be a fun thing to do. And so I think those would be a couple other things to keep in mind related to the self-care.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And there's always a lot of different strategies and ideas around self-care and around managing stress. I guess I would say for me, I think before I can support anybody else, I need to be doing something to support myself. And so what I want to encourage is just looking at my own self-care, right, and how I'm modeling that behavior for the people around me, right? I think that's really, really big. And regardless of whether anybody else notices or not, I'll be better prepared to support somebody else if I'm taking good care of myself, right?
In that role modeling as well, it might be difficult for a student to understand self-care if they're not seeing folks in their household ensuring that they're taking care of themselves as well, finding ways to bring their own stress down.
I've seen students have a lot of anxiety sometimes about math or about their ability to write or understanding a homework assignment. So just a gentle reminder that there are writing centers on most university campuses, tutoring centers. So in addition to the counseling center and the mental health support, there's also academic support. And staying on top of those questions, making sure you ask your faculty member a question if you don't understand something, that's what we're here for. That might help reduce some of that anxiety as well.
I agree, because whether or not you'd like to have a conversation with your student about social capital, but social capital is all about having people around you and you're working together for the good of a goal. And we know that studies show that students who use resources early and often are the successful students. So in whatever way we can, we need to break that stigma around using any type of campus resource, because everybody's available to you, and we love our jobs and we love assisting students, and to be able to help you save time, save money, save stress, we're all in. And so please tap into us to be able to make life much easier in that first semester and throughout your entire educational experience.
Hey, well, we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, can you talk a little about the culture of your campuses? What can students get involved with, activities that don't involve alcohol?
I guess I'll go first. You know, I work at CU Boulder, and when I started there, I was overwhelmed because it's like its own city. So you ask what activities can they get involved with? I think it feels like there's too many, right? I think the problem that students often face is that there's so many things to choose from that it's like overwhelming, and they don't know what to do and what to get involved in. So that would be my response, is that it's like I mean, we're talking like 32,000 students, right? So it's enormous. So yes, there's a lot of activities. There's things happening all the time. I think the challenge that many students face is like, what do I pick? There's too many things that are conflicting that I want to do, and I don't know what to do. And now I feel like I can't choose anything. Right.
Our campus culture, we're a community college, so we can be a great place for students to begin their academic journey, you know, with some of those smaller class sizes and having a lot of those same opportunities, a 4-year institution at our 2-year institution. So everything about our institution doesn't lend itself necessarily to, you know, alcohol, in the sense of we don't have residence halls or fraternities and sororities, some of those places that maybe we might feel that there could be some alcohol and other drugs maybe a part of those experiences. And so so our culture is, you know, one in which it's just not there, in the sense of when they're there taking their classes. And to Chris's point, absolutely get involved with something that's maybe familiar to you, so it doesn't seem overwhelming. If you were involved with a certain club in your high school, then maybe seek out that certain club at your college. And if it doesn't exist, then create it, so you can be around like-minded people that think the same way you do, and maybe carry those same values that you do.
Right.
And I'm at MSU Denver, so we are a commuter university as well, which means a lot of our students live at home and a lot of our students live on near campus housing, but we don't have residence halls on the campus. It's a very diverse university. We have a lot of first-generation students. We're a Hispanic serving institution, which is pretty cool. That means that we can apply for additional grants for our students. But we offer a lot of things, even though people don't live on campus in a hall. A lot of things like student clubs, like I said, sports, go Roadrunners, by the way, concerts, student plays, and we're across the street literally from downtown Denver. So coffee shops, I often will take a walk downtown or along the Cherry Creek just for a break. So quite a few things to do to get involved.
Great. Next question is, can you discuss what a student should do if they're feeling isolated?
I would say reach out to anyone on campus. It could be a faculty member, it could be a staff member that you met one time, but find somebody, and really find a somebody that's your significant other, so to speak, throughout your entire collegiate career. And the nice thing about it, if you get to that somebody that you feel that you trust or can talk to, then they can help with those soft handoffs to the people who may be able to better assist. So if you're a student, don't feel like you have to find the right person to talk to, just find a person.
I feel like that's a really important question, this piece around isolation. I mean, especially right now when we're sort of in this pandemic. And I think it's been something that, at least as long as I've been working at CU, I've seen with students where you're kind of many students are coming into a new place, developing new friends and social structures, and that can be really challenging. Some people have a hard time finding their community or the people that they want to spend time with. And I would just echo kind of what Dana said, is just keep trying, right? keep trying. I think that's easier said than done sometimes, though, when we're feeling lonely. But keep trying.
One strategy might be to find, and I totally agree with what they're saying, find that one person, and it might be in your class. So if you're in class, whether that's face-to-face or online, if there's someone in the class who makes comments and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was about to say, or you just feel a connection with them, reach out to them, email or calling them, or hey, can you hang on to the Zoom call after class just for a minute and see if they'd be interested in being a study partner with you, or do you want to just grab a cup of coffee sometime so we can talk about class? And it's an easy way to connect with someone because you automatically have something in common. You have class in common. And then you find out if you have similar interests in pets or sports or music or whatever, but it's a nice in. And college is often the time where we make lifetime friends. So having the courage to put yourself out there, even a little bit, even if it's for a coffee or a virtual connection, can we just chat before the next class for 10 minutes on a Zoom call? Those small steps can start to lead to those relationships that help us to feel a little less isolated.
Absolutely, because a student could maybe reach out to an instructor or an advisor or somebody in financial aid that they've worked with to help maybe get them connected to student life, but also exactly, sometimes that peer-to-peer connection, nothing can beat it. So we would want you to encourage your student to maybe seek out resources on campus that are student-led and student-driven, with Red Rocks having the peer coaches, and I'm, absolutely positive, the other two institutions would have something like that as well. If not more, that's a great starting point because those students have been there, done that. And so they can say, I know exactly how you feel because I felt that way too my first semester. And then they can start that conversation.
Great, thank you. We have one last question. I love the point made about helping your child advocate for themselves and how to ask for help. Are you aware of any resources that explicitly discuss how to do this?
I've got a hodgepodge of answers. One of them, for example, we've got a Denver Scholars Foundation on campus, as a lot of universities do, and I happen to be a mentor for them. And one of the conversations we have, every semester I do a presentation on how to talk to faculty. And so that's specifically for this issue. We also have classes. I think most universities offer classes in things like public speaking, conflict resolution, communication skills. Those kind of things can very directly help students with their assertiveness and ability to ask for help for themselves. And lastly, a faculty mentor. If there's someone the student looks up to say, I'm really struggling saying this or that, or asking for my needs to be met, do you have any pointers? And if you've got the benefit of having a mentor, hugely beneficial.
I think practice makes perfect sometimes in this case, because it's not easy for words to just roll off of a student's, tongue. It's not easy for us as adults either. So exactly, if you have those folks or those connections that you can do some role playing with, if you're one of those folks that may be writing it down and, saying it multiple times to kind of build that courage and that confidence to approach a particular office or person, then that practice in scripting and role playing can really be very beneficial.
Yeah, I don't know about you all, but sometimes when I see somebody that I love that's struggling, I want to fix it for them. I want to help. I want to do it for them. And that can really be disempowering. I know that for me, I've gotten into relationships in the past where I end up accidentally sort of disempowering somebody that I care about because I want to help them. And so I think it's okay too that, like, especially somebody coming into a totally new environment and learning how to advocate for themselves, like they might struggle, right? Like they might have a hard time with it at first. And we want to support them to continue to try and step out, and that it's okay if they struggle. It's okay if they're having a hard time. Like that's part of challenge and growth. And so I just want to name that part too.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment. As a parent, that is just the hardest thing, to let your kids fail, but it's super important because that's how they learn, and how they learn how to advocate for themselves and develop that self-efficacy. So yeah, I really appreciate that thought. Any other last minute comments, additional things you want to throw out?
I would just encourage the parents to do self-care and make sure that you are also developing yourself, so that you're not just doing the whole empty nest syndrome type of thing, that you're using this time for your own self-care and to develop whatever interests that you've been wanting to do as well.
Yes, because I can only imagine just the richness of the conversations that you will be having with your students, and just, getting that excitement of them navigating the college, but then also with that excitement, having those open channels to talk about the challenges as well.
Yeah, and just want to encourage you in terms of the alcohol and other drug piece, do have that conversation, right? As we want, I think if there's one thing that you could leave with today, is that just stepping in and engaging and asking your students about their opinions, if they think they want to drink or use other drugs, or maybe they do already, right? Or what they think about that. That will have benefit, right? That's empowering students and helping them to realize that, oh, like, this is a decision that's mine, right? Like, I'm going to be out there. I'm going to have these opportunities, and right. And having that conversation, you're empowering them to start thinking about, how do they want to show up in relationship with alcohol and other drugs? So
I would add sexual safety to that conversation as well, because that's a really important point, Chris.
Agreed.
Well, thank you so much. This was extremely helpful, especially as a parent of kids right on the cusp of that. Just really want to thank you for your time. A video of this will go up on our website, which I'm going to put in the chat. So this is just great for folks that couldn't attend today. They'll be able to go in and watch the webinar. So Chris, Dana, and Annie, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and your expertise and your resources. Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Don't do it alone. Just don't do it alone.
So valuable. Yeah, great.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Is there anything else that you need from me before I sign off?
I don't think so. Leah, any other last minute?
No, thank you so much. That was amazing. You guys did great. Blew away all expectations. So thank you.
This was wonderful. Yep, such a great resource.
And if there's anybody who reaches out and ever just wants to talk, any parents or anything, I'm happy to, so.
Thank you.
And
yeah, cool. And thank you so much for sharing resources. I'll share that out tomorrow.
Yeah, I have some things. I think the best one will be this parent handbook thing. It's a little, but so some of the data is a little bit off, but all the main concepts are really solid. So I feel like that would be helpful.
Fabulous.
Cool.
So I'll email that over to you today.
Yeah.
Be in partnership with you both. I'm going to go now. Thank you.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michelle. That went great.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to you and Haley for setting that up. That was
They complemented each other so well, I think.
it was great. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my only thing was like,